Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha in Volume 3. We're going to be studying chapters 11 through 20. Last week, I skipped ahead without realizing it during the class. Some of you guys that might have been reading along might have been wondering, like, what's going on here, Dave? It's in chapter 21. That's next week. Well, I accidentally skipped over chapters 11 and 12, so now I'm going to move right into 11 and 12, or 11, I'm sorry, I skipped over 11 through 20, and now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be starting with chapter 11 today, going through chapter 20, but then next week, we're going to be moving into chapter 31 through 40. So if you've been reading along, you've been reading all the chapters, and here we just got a little bit out of sync. This is the first time that I've ever had this experience. So nonetheless, today we're going to be studying chapters 11 through 20, and then next week it's going to be chapters 31 through 40. And then from that point forward, we'll be back onto the normal schedule. So thank you guys for understanding. I didn't realize that until I started editing the podcast and looking around at some of the things that I was doing. So thank you for understanding. And if there's anyone who would like to read for our class today, you're welcome to volunteer. What we're going to be doing is reading chapters 11 through 20. And I just invite anybody who's in Zoom to be able to read those. And then after somebody reads it, I will share some teachings on that. And then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. You'll be able to ask any and all questions that you like. So is there someone in Zoom who would like to read this first chapter 11? Okay, I see Marcy's physical hand. Go ahead, Marcy.
Well, thank you, Teacher David. And I don't mind reading unless somebody else would like to read. So whatever happens. Okay. Chapter 11. 4 sources of depletion and accumulation of the wealth. The 4 sources of depletion of the wealth. The wealth thus amassed has 4 sources of depletion. 1, womanizing. 2, drunkenness, heedlessness, gambling, unwholesome friendship, unwholesome companionship, unwholesome camaraderie. Paja, just as if there were a large reservoir with 4 inlets and 4 outlets, a man would close the inlets and open the outlets, the sufficient rain does not fall. One could predict the water in the reservoir to decrease rather than increase. Pajaha. So the wealth thus amassed has 4 sources of depletion. 1, womanizing. 2, drunkenness, heedlessness. 3, gambling. 4, unwholesome friendship, unwholesome companionship, unwholesome camaraderie. 4 sources of accumulation of the wealth. Pajaha. The wealth thus amassed has 4 sources of accumulation. 1, one avoids womanizing. 2, one avoids drunkenness, heedlessness. 3, one avoids gambling. 4, one cultivates wholesome friendships, wholesome companionships, wholesome camaraderie-ships. Pajaha, just as if there were a large reservoir with 4 inlets and 4 outlets, and a man would open the inlets and close the outlets, and sufficient rain falls, one could predict the water in the reservoir to increase rather than decrease. Pajaha. So the wealth thus amassed has 4 sources of accumulation. 1 avoids womanizing. 1 avoids drunkenness and heedlessness. 1 avoids gambling. 1 cultivates wholesome friendship, wholesome companionship, wholesome camaraderie-ship. These are the 4 things that lead to welfare and peacefulness of the householder in this very life.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So remember what the Buddha is doing throughout all of his teachings is he's helping you awaken to the natural law of karma. He's helping you see this cause and effect between what decisions you make, either wisely or unwisely, and then they lead to either wholesome or unwholesome results. And one of the things that you're going to need in life is you're going to need an income to be able to support yourself. The Buddha's not teaching you to chase after money because that doesn't lead to happiness, but you're going to need a certain amount of income to take care of your food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care. These are the 5 things that you're going to need in order to sustain your life. That's food, water, clothing, shelter, and medical care. So you're going to need a certain amount of money to be able to do that. So as you apply work and effort to acquiring an income, you would like to be sure that it goes towards things that are going to help you grow and develop as an individual, help you to grow your resources to be able to then provide for yourself and those around you for the things that you guys need to sustain your life. So here the Buddha is showing you the cause and effect between certain things that you could potentially be doing that is either going to deplete your income, your wealth, or accumulate your income or your wealth. And here he's talking about womanizing. And by the way, he's talking to men, so that's why he's using this womanizing. Essentially what this is going around and chasing people around and having casual sex with lots of different people. That's going to be very expensive. So that's why it would deplete your wealth. And then drunkenness or heedlessness. If you're taking any kind of substances that cause heedlessness, your mind is unattentive and unalert. So therefore, you're going to make unwise decisions that are going to lead to unwholesome results. Gambling is using your money to be able to play some game of chance that has the opportunity to win some prize. This is going to deplete your money. And then unwholesome friends, unwholesome companions, and unwholesome comrades. So if you're around unwholesome people, they're going to be into unwholesome things, and this is going to affect you based on your choice to be their friend. So if you have a friend that's calling you up to bail them out of jail, this is going to deplete your wealth. If they ask to borrow money and then they borrow it and never pay you back, or you're just hanging around unwholesome people, they're into unwholesome things, you're going to have certain expenses that you're going to need to pay for. And then likewise or conversely, you are going to see here the Buddha is talking about the accumulation of wealth by avoiding going around and having lots of sex with different people, by avoiding taking substances that cause heedlessness and avoiding gambling, and then also cultivating wholesome friendships. This is going to lead to the accumulation of wealth, because when you have wholesome friends, they're going to be into wholesome things. They're going to have wholesome friends themselves that are different than you. And as you're growing both professionally and personally, you'll have people that will be helping you and contributing to your life. Because in order to acquire any kind of money or assets, you're going to need people around you. You're going to need people that support you and are willing to help you. You're going to need people that acknowledge that you have some type of wisdom or some type of skill or product that they would like to use. So having wholesome people around you, it'll ensure that you're not depleting your money by doing certain things that could potentially take away your money. So here the Buddha is giving you these 4 things, and these are 4 things to pay attention to, that if you're doing any of these things, of course, you need to eliminate them. But remember, every time you're learning, you're not believing the teachings. If you've ever done any of these things, you can see that it's led to unwholesome results where you've depleted your wealth. Or if you've slowly stopped doing these things and you slowly started avoiding womanizing and drunkenness and gambling and started cultivating wholesome friends, you can see that your income starts to improve and starts to increase. So this is how you can independently verify his teachings, because you're learning it, reflecting on it, and then now you're going to need to practice it and eliminate any of these things if you're actually practicing any of these, so that then you can build up your wealth, because that's going to help you to be more stable and more solid in the world, where you're not having to have worry and anxiety about where your money is or where your next meal is going to come from, or living paycheck to paycheck. That's no fun. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is a pretty straightforward chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Helen has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. So you mentioned games of chance, which is gambling. But if karma decides about every outcome in our reality, then what are games of chance based on?
Games of chance are based on cause and effect still, because if you have a dice in your hand and you're shaking it to a certain degree and then you roll it, there's a certain cause and effect there. We usually look at it as good luck or bad luck, but it's actually a sequence of events. This is where you can see there's no such thing as luck. Amount of pressure you throw on the dice, or the randomization of playing cards, for example, there's a cause and effect. There's a sequence that's going on there. It's not actually good luck or bad luck, even though we usually refer to it that way. But there's no being that's giving you good luck or bad luck. There's no entity that's giving you good luck or bad luck. It's just a sequence of events that leads to you having made certain decisions that are going to either have you winning in a particular game or losing. And more frequently, you're going to be losing. And that's why continuing to base your decisions in craving that I want more money, I want more money, I want more money, let me gamble, gamble, gamble. It's going to lead to the depletion of your wealth. That's the unwholesome results of your craving.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to move on to this next chapter, which is chapter 12. Let's scroll here. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Julie, go ahead, ma'am.
6 ways of wasting one's substance. Householder's son, and which are the 6 ways of wasting one's substance that the noble disciple does not follow? 1. Addiction to strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, is one way of wasting one's substance. 2. Haunting the streets at unfitting times is one. 3. Attending fairs is one. 4. Being addicted to gambling is one. 5. Keeping unwholesome company is one. 6. Habitual idleness is one. Householder's son, there are these 6 dangers attached to addiction to strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness. 1. Present waste of money. 2. Increased armed arguments. 3. Liability to sickness. 4. Loss of good name. 5. Indecent exposure of one's person. 6. Weakening of the intellect, wisdom. Householder's son, there are these 6 dangers attached to haunting the streets at unfitting times. 1. One is defenseless and without protection. 2. And so are one's wife or life partner and children. 3. And so is one's property. 4. One is suspected of crimes. 5. False reports are pinned on one. 6. One encounters all sorts of unpleasantness. Householder's son, there are these 6 dangers attached to frequenting fairs. 1 is always thinking. Where is their dancing? 2. Where is their singing? 3. Where are they playing music? 4. Where are they reciting? 5. Where is their hand clapping? 6. Where are the drums? Householder's son, there are these 6 dangers attached to gambling. 1. The winner makes enemies. 2. The loser regrets his loss. 3. One wastes one's present wealth. 4. One's word is not trusted in the community. 5. One is despised by one's friends and companions. 6. One is not in demand for marriage because a gambler cannot afford to maintain a wife or life partner. Householder's son, there are these 6 dangers attached to keeping unwholesome company. 1. Any gambler. 2. Any glutton. 3. Any drunkard. 4. Any cheat. 5. Any trickster. 6. Any bully is his friend, his companion. There are these 6 dangers attached to idleness. 1. Thinking it's too cold, one does not work. 2. Thinking it's too hot, one does not work. 3. Thinking it's too early, one does not work. 4. Thinking it's too late, one does not work. 5. Thinking I'm too hungry, one does not work. 6. Thinking I'm too full, one does not work.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here the Buddha is talking about wasting one's substance. Well, one's substance is this is like your vitality, your vigor. And if you're doing any of these 6 things, then you're wasting that. You're not using it in order to progress your life forward. So he's talking about these 6 different ways that you could waste your vitality or your vigor. And then he gives you details of exactly what's going on if you do any of these things. And again, he's showing you the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, or action and result, showing you what unwise decisions lead to certain unwholesome results. And if you've done any of these things, you can independently verify what he's talking about here. That if you've ever been addicted to substances that cause heedlessness, you see that you wasted your vitality, your vigor. You weren't able to move your life forward. If you were haunting the streets at unfitting times, maybe you were coming home at 2, 3, 4, 5 a.m. in the morning, and then you were waking up at 12, 1, 2, 3 p.m. You weren't able to go outside during the daylight hours and interact with people who are into wholesome things and making decisions that are going to move your life forward. Attending fairs is one. What he's talking about here is entertainment, that if you're always looking for entertainment, then it's going to deplete your vigor or your vitality. During that time frame, it was fairs. That was pretty much the entertainment. Nowadays, you might think, if you're on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, you're wasting your vitality, or you're just watching YouTube videos for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, you're wasting your vitality. Where if you'd like to do those things, do them in moderation, 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then set it down and go do something else. So if you are doing this, then you're going to be always wanting what's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. The Buddha talks about craving here, essentially, when he's talking about this entertainment of fairs. Where is their dancing? Where is their singing, playing music, reciting, hand clapping in drums? This is like the mind, like longing, yearning for these things. So you might be longing, yearning, like, what is that person going to post? How many likes am I going to have? How many messages am I going to have? The mind is just longing and yearning for certain things like social media. So you can learn how to do those things in moderation. If you're gambling and addicted to gambling, you're going to waste your substance and your vitality because you're not going to be able to move your life forward. If you're keeping unwholesome company, this is like friends who are into unwholesome things. Again, we talked about that in the last discourse. And then habitual idleness is one. This is where you're complacent, you're dull, you're lethargic, you're just sitting around not really doing anything to make decisions to move your life forward. So you can see what the Buddha is talking about here with each one of these. And if you've ever done any of these things, you can confirm that, yep, he's 100% true. If you're taking substances that cause heedlessness, you waste your money, you increase your arguments, you experience sickness more, you lose your good name or your reputation. Haven't really experienced indecent exposure of one's person, but I've seen other people experience that. That's a potential, right? Or weakening of the intellect or wisdom. The mind isn't as sharp and as crisp when you're using substances that cause heedlessness. So you can go through each one of these and independently verify them yourself. But a wise individual who's interested in moving their life forward and improving more and more of what they're experiencing in the world, they would choose to no longer do any of these things and phase these things out. So if you're noticing that you're spending a lot of time on social media or indulged in entertainment, or if you're noticing that your friends are into unwholesome things, or if you're noticing that you tend to be complacent and sit around and be dull and lethargic, you would like to improve these things along with any of the others as well. So let me know if you guys have questions here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one, which is chapter 13. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
5 chords of sensual pleasure. Monks, there are these 5 chords of sensual pleasure. What are the 5? Forms recognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire, and provocative of craving. 2. Sounds recognizable by the ear that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire, and provocative of craving. 3. Odors recognizable by the nose that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire, and provocative of craving. 4. Flavors recognizable by the tongue that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire, and provocative of craving. 5. Physical objects recognizable by the body that are wished for, desired, agreeable and likable, connected with sensual desire, and provocative of craving. These are the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. As to those ascetics and Brahmins who are tied to these 5 chords of sensual pleasure, obsessed with them and completely committed to them, and who use them without seeing the danger in them or understanding the escape from them, it may be understood of them. They have met with calamity, met with disaster. The evil one may do with them as he likes. Suppose a forest deer who was bound lay down in a heap of traps. It might be understood of him. He has met with calamity, met with disaster. The hunter can do with him as he likes, and when the hunter comes, he cannot go where he wants. As to those ascetics and Brahmins who are not tied to these 5 cords of sensual pleasure, who are not obsessed with them or completely committed to them, and who use them seeing the danger in them and understanding the escape from them, it may be understood of them. They have not met with calamity, not met with disaster. The evil one cannot do with them as he likes. Suppose the forest deer who was unbound, laid down on a heap of traps. It might be understood of him. He has not met with calamity, not met with disaster. The hunter cannot do with them as he likes. And when the hunter comes, he can go where he wants. Suppose the forest deer is wandering in the forest wilds. He walks without fear, stands without fear, sits without fear, lies down without fear. Why is that? Because he is out of the hunter's range. Excuse me. So too, quite distant from sense desires, distant from unwholesome mental states, enters and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy. This monk is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one by depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity. This follows the second, third, and the fourth jhana. The space is infinite, the conscious is infinite, the base of nothingness, the base of neither perception nor non-perception. The discourses are identical except for the reference to each attainment. Again, by completely surmounting the base of neither perception nor non-perception, a monk enters upon and resides in the elimination of perception and feeling, and his taints are destroyed by his seeding with wisdom. This monk is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one by depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity, and to have crossed beyond its attachment to the world. He walks without fear, stands without fear, sits without fear, lies down without fear. Why is that? Because he is out of the evil one's range.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here the Buddha is talking about the 5 cords of sensual pleasure. One of the things you guys are going to learn, and you've probably been exposed to with me to a certain degree, is the 6 sense bases and the fetter or the taint or pollution of sensual desire. This is inside the mind, where the mind is longing, yearning through the sense bases, wanting permanently agreeable contact. That when you see things that you agree with, you get pleasant feelings. When you see things you disagree with, you get painful feelings. When you hear certain things that you agree with, you get pleasant feelings. When you hear certain things you disagree with, you get painful feelings. This is the examples I give, like when you're driving in a car and you're at a stoplight and you hear music that you like, maybe you get really excited and you feel really good about that. But then when you pull up to the next light and you hear something that's disagreeable, you get those painful feelings like frustration or agitation or annoyance. This is the mind having sensual desire. And it's happening with the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. What the Buddha is talking about here is he's talking about the cords of sensual pleasure. And what you need to be able to understand is the internal sense bases and the external sense bases to be able to understand the cords. What the internal sense base is the actual organ, the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. That's the internal sense base. Then there's external sense bases, which is the form. So the eye sees the form. That's the external sense base. The ear hears the sound. The sound is the external sense base. The nose smells the odor. The odor is the external sense base. The tongue tastes the flavor. The flavor is the external sense base. The body comes in contact with a physical object. The physical object is the external sense base. And then the mind experiences the mental object. The mental object's the external sense base. So what he's talking about here is the cord. This is the longing, yearning from the internal sense base to the external sense base. And ultimately what you're looking to do is you're looking to cut this cord and get rid of it. Because as long as your mind is pulling towards the object of its affection, then what he's describing here is that Mara, this evil being, can do anything it wants with you. You can be tempted to do any number of things. So let's just say you have a craving in the mind for, say, some kind of substance like marijuana or something like this. It's only a matter of time. You maybe walk through a certain area, you hear music coming out of a bar, you smell the alcohol, you hear the laughter. Next thing you know, boom, you're right in there. in the bar or laughing it up, having drinks, using drugs and alcohol and things like this. And next thing you know, you're experiencing all kinds of unwholesome results. And that's because of this cord that is pulling you towards that external sense base. The internal sense base is pulling you towards this external sense base. And what you're looking to do is cut that off and eliminate it, because otherwise you're going to be subjected to the unwholesome states of mind. And this evil being of Mara can do anything that it wants with you. And the Buddha is giving this analogy of laying down on traps, that if a deer lays down on traps, then the hunter can do anything it wants with this individual, with this deer. But if you aren't bound by sensual pleasure and sensual desire, then you can get to a point where you're not bound by these traps. You're free. And that's when the mind enters into the jhanas. That's where Mara knows that you've accomplished a certain amount of wisdom and you've got a certain amount of discipline of the mind, and Mara can't tempt you any longer. So by the time you get to the jhanas, it's like blindfolding Mara. Mara is this formless being that some people refer to as the devil or Satan or Lucifer or something like this. It's a real actual being that is out there trying to cause calamity in the world. And there's other beings that's working on Mara's behalf as well. These beings can't force you to do anything, but they can surely tempt you. And what you're looking to do is cultivate enough wisdom and cultivate enough inner discipline of the mind that this being, when it does tempt you, that you know to make wise decisions to move away from those things. And once your mind is in the jhanas, Mara understands that you have too much wisdom and too much mental discipline, that it's like blindfolding Mara, and Mara no longer tries to tempt you. But your mind in those jhanas can actually regress. So if you end up regressing out of the jhanas, once again, you're susceptible to Mara. So you would like to get into the first stage of enlightenment, where from there, you're not going to regress backwards. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 13, 5 Chords of Central Pleasure. Okay, so we have a bunch of hands up. Vibhav, do you have a question, or is that just from reading?
I do have a question, not on the 5 chords specifically. I did have a question on the jhanas, but if you want to take that later, I can do that as well.
No, you can go ahead, because this chapter has that as well.
Yeah, I've read this in multiple places about the space is infinite, conscious is infinite, base of nothingness, the base of neither perception or non-perception, but it's kind of hard to grasp what that means. So I was wondering if you could put some light on it.
Yeah, there's a chapter where I explain these in detail. I think it's in volume 7. I'd have to look it up. I haven't memorized exactly what each one of these are, but I know what they are, and I wrote them down in the book so you would know what they are. These are attainments that happen in addition to the jhanas. These are 4 different attainments, but I haven't memorized them because not everybody actually experiences them. Some people do and some people don't. They deal with such things like being able to observe your past lives, getting to the point where you're not clinging to perceptions and things like this. So if you'd like to look it up in volume 7, I'm pretty sure that's where it's at. And if you can't find it, you can just let me know and I'll look it up and send you the chapter. All you need to do is take one of these and do a search on volume 7, and you'll be able to find them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. So, Teacher David, I have noticed that the mind and the body gets what people would call goosebumps or tingling or a sensation of like excitement. I've noticed this, and I find that I get it, especially with what the portion, I'm probably going to say his name wrong, Barbara brought up. When that was being read, I felt this extraordinary amount of joy, and I could feel the tingling in the body, and I got the goosebumps, and I was having this. At that moment in time, am I cutting that sensation off too as well? Because I know that this mind has had craving towards enlightenment, and it's only been recently when I have cut that craving off and said to the mind, nope, we're slow progress, gradual progress, let it go. As long as you keep practicing, you will eventually get there, let it go. So am I doing this correctly? Is this being doing it correctly by cutting that off at that time?
Yes, those goosebumps, those warm, fuzzy feelings, those are the bodily sensations associated with conditioned pleasant feelings. So the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where you're aware of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects, that's what that is you're aware of those bodily sensations associated with the pleasant feelings. There is no secret on the path to enlightenment, but if there's one thing to really clue into that's going to absolutely help every single person get to enlightenment, is that you got to be able to see those conditioned pleasant feelings as just as much of a problem as the painful ones. Because if you can cut off and let go of the conditioned pleasant feelings, you're not going to experience the painful ones. As long as the mind's experiencing the conditioned pleasant feelings, then the painful ones are waiting right around the corner. Because whatever your mind formed a conditioned pleasant feeling about, that condition is impermanent, and as soon as it changes, the mind isn't experiencing the pleasure anymore and it moves to the pain. So the mind needs to be willing to let go of this temporary pleasure in order to get to the permanent enjoyment, the permanent joy. So eliminating these cords of central pleasure is what you're doing when you're cutting off and letting go. When you're noticing the bodily sensations coming up, that's the early warning system that's alerting you that your mind's about to form a conditioned feeling, and you'd like to cut that off and let it go, and preserving the mind and guarding the mind. And that's what's going to ultimately help propel someone to enlightenment.
Thank you, Teacher David.
You're welcome. Okay, looks like Yusuf has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, my question is about the last chapter where you were talking about wasting one's time. I don't have any relationship whatsoever with the social media because it's affecting my mind. So like now I have plenty of time because I'm also on a holiday, and I am putting that time, all of it, on like watching movies and TV shows because they have less effect on my mind. But you said one should maybe put like 13 minutes or 1 hour in doing those things and then do wiser things in his day. But what are these wiser things? Like my question might be, with your wisdom now, if you were my age, what will you do in your day? Like how will you spend your time?
Sure. So what you would like to do is do these things in moderation, right? So there's no harm in watching a TV program or a movie. There's no harm in looking at YouTube videos or, getting on social media and all these kinds of things. But you would like to do it in moderation for whatever amount of time is moderation for you, because at different times in your life, since you're a student, different times of month or weeks, you've got a lot heavier workload and you don't have the time to do these other things. So now might be the time that you're doing some of these other things and you need to give the mind a break. But with all the different things that you're involved in, you would like to be cultivating wisdom. I think you're in your early 20s. You would like to be cultivating wisdom continuously, because that's what's going to lead to improvement in your life, is having more and more wisdom. So whether that's reading books, watching documentaries, whether it's building wholesome relationships with people in the community, whether it's volunteering your time to do some type of work and build some kind of skill, whether it's getting an internship where you're actually working and making a small amount of money, but you're gaining good skills and you're getting mentors that are helping you to grow and develop. That's what it is that you would like to be doing at this age, is building up your wisdom so that later on in life, more and more people will be interested to pay you for the things that you've acquired in terms of your wisdom.
Is it appropriate to ask a couple of questions related to this topic, or that would be like taking your time?
You can ask questions. If they're really personal, it's probably better to talk in a personal discussion.
No. They are not. So I will ask 2 questions. You said to cultivate wisdom in my days, but what wisdom are you talking about? Maybe when reading books, is it like a general wisdom about life, or like about Buddhism, or like the spiritual path that I'm trying to cultivate? And the second question is, because I have left social media and I have nothing to do, like I put all my day on watching movies. Like I'm watching now a TV show and I watch like 15 or 10 episodes a day. I have nothing else to do. I am not putting my mind on anything else. So will that be moderation or what?
Okay. So let's do one question at a time. Can you share the first question?
Okay. About the wisdom that I should cultivate, is it only about like my spiritual path, or like a general wisdom by reading books and attending courses or some things like this.
Okay, so you would always like to be cultivating wisdom about the path to enlightenment. That's something that you would like to always be doing throughout your days and weeks and months. And sometimes you're going to do that, more involved, and sometimes you're going to step back from that. You always should prioritize that, because without cultivating your mind and training your mind, nothing else in life is going to go well for you. So you should always prioritize the cultivation of wisdom about the path to enlightenment. But there's other things in the world to cultivate wisdom about too, and you would like to look at doing that, whatever it is that you're interested in, whatever field of study that you're interested in, whatever type of career that you might be looking towards. You can be cultivating wisdom not only through books, but like I mentioned, through volunteering your time or doing internships and things like this. When I was going through college, I was constantly working. I started out in food service, because that's essentially what people do, is work in restaurants and catering companies and things like this. But then I started to pivot, and I started to work in a computer lab. Then I worked for some different manufacturing companies, but I was doing computers because that was my major. Then during the summers, I would work for the government in order to work in doing computers. So I was always building up my skills so that ultimately by the time I graduated college, it was really easy for me to get a job and get a really decent salary and a nice job, because I had all this resume of skills and things like this. And I also had money to be able to support myself when I left college too. So you would like to be working on, yes, building up your wisdom about the teachings of the Buddha, but you need to be building your wisdom about your career and whatever it is you're going to provide to the world in order to sustain your life through your livelihood, because you're going to need to provide the world something so that the world is comfortable to provide you something to sustain your life.
Okay, so in relation to this, because social media affects my mind, I decided to put my mind on some things that it can rest doing, such as watching TV shows. So when you said read books or watch documentaries or some things like this, my mind just isn't able. Like when I take a book to read it, I throw it away after 10 minutes. When I try to watch something else to entertain myself, I throw it away. When I try to watch a YouTube video, I throw it away. The only thing that my mind can rest with is maybe movies or TV shows. Mm-hmm. I said, yeah, okay, maybe now my mind isn't ready to do other things, because if maybe feeling bored or something, maybe I need couple months, couple years till I get used to that. What is your advice? Should I keep going only watching movies and TV shows because this is the only thing I can do, or I keep putting my mind in the situation where he doesn't want to be in, even though that it is very hard to do that?
Yeah, that's what you should do, is you should build up your ability to sit and read a book or look at some other things, because the mind's pulling you through the sensual pleasure, through these cords towards the movies, and you're binge watching. That's a craving. When you're watching 10, 15 episodes of a particular show, that's the mind craving more and more and more of this particular show. You need to learn how to pick something up and put it down. So if you're going to pick up an episode of a show, watch that one episode and then pick up a book. And if you normally can only read it for 5 minutes before you toss it aside, try to read it 7 minutes or 8 minutes. And then go do something else, and then come back and do that book some more. And slowly but surely, you're going to learn, the mind's going to be trained to be able to now do the things that you need, because you're going to need this balance where you can take in TV programming and things that are on a screen, but you're going to need to learn how to sit and digest something through reading as well. The fact that your mind doesn't like it and it's not interested in it is actually all the more reason why it would be wise to kind of coax your mind into being comfortable with doing that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question that I was thinking about, and I actually wanted your advice about it. Of course, I think you are familiar with animes and mangas because you live in Thailand and it's popular there. So sometimes I try to set myself to watch a whole anime season or a whole manga chapters, 20 or 30, just to train my mind. Look, mind, you are watching this or you are reading this, so finish it before you jump to another thing, before you jump to a movie and then YouTube and then Facebook. Finish this and then go on something else. But is it this the middle way, or I might need to put 10 minutes a day an hour a day or what? Because it's hard because my mind keeps jumping and jumping and jumping from thing to thing.
You're going to need to feel this out for yourself because you need to sit with the mind and look at the mind. So if you're picking up a book and you're reading for 5 minutes and you feel like you've hit a wall, go out for a walk. Go walk around, go get a glass of water, whatever it is that you need, and then come back to it and try to soak it in again and do this little by little and kind of coaxing the mind into being comfortable to read. And you're going to have to observe the mind and decide what amount of time at any given time you're going to need to be reading versus going off and doing something, because your mind's going to be functioning differently at different times. I can't really give you a pre-prescribed prescription of how long to do one thing or another, but that's where your mindfulness comes in and your wise decision making. If you know that you need to move the mind in this direction, you're not interested in forcing it, then you take the mind up to where it needs to be and where it feels comfortable, and then go read. Then go for a walk before you come back and read again.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, Helena.
Thank you. So when it comes to cards, I will give 2 scenarios. Let's imagine that we are in a beautiful garden full of flowers. And the second scenario would be a wonderful concert of classical music. And let's say I'm in those scenarios and I recognize conditional positive emotion and a craving. So what should I do? Pat off and let go, and I still don't know what to do, at a concert, let's say, how to enjoy it without the craving in that situation.
The mind hasn't learned how to do that yet because you're very early in practice. So if you've already gone to the concert and you're there and you notice all this pleasure coming up in the mind, of course you would like to try to cut that off and learn how to enjoy it while not having conditioned pleasant feelings, but your mind's not going to know how to do that at this stage. You've only been studying with me for a few months. So you're going to experience some conditioned pleasant feelings, some painful ones, and neither painful nor pleasant over the next few years as you're making your way to enlightenment. So in that situation, yes, you would like to cut it off and let it go, but just understand that the mind can't do what it is that I'm sharing with you that it needs to do, which is learn how to enjoy this event without having conditioned pleasant feelings. But as you start experiencing more and more of getting rid of the craving, desire, attachment, and the sensual desire, it'll start peering through where you can start experiencing some situations where you just enjoy it, but you don't have conditioned pleasant feelings. It's just going to take time to accumulate enough meditation, enough generosity, enough practicing of the Eightfold Path that the mind starts getting a taste of this. And then you can start to know more and more what that's like.
Okay, patience. Thank you.
Yep. It's interesting because you can hear me talking and teaching about what one should be doing and what you need to experience. And you might understand it intellectually, but the mind just won't do it. The mind can sometimes become frustrated with this because intellectually you'll know that it's unwise to, do one particular thing or another, but yet you do it anyway because the craving is so strong, right? And this is where it can become frustrating sometimes. But that's where you got to let go of any craving to be perfect today and realize that you're a work in progress and that sometimes you're going to intellectually know something is unwise, but the mind still does it. And then you got to look at that and see the results and how, it led to something unwholesome, and convince yourself that you're not going to be doing that in the future. There's some cravings that it took me, 5-6 years to get rid of from the time that I actively got on the path. And I was letting them go before that without even realizing that that's what I was working towards. So you're going to have this kind of buildup where the mind needs to mature and mature and mature through all the meditation and the generosity and the cutting off and letting go before something actually is let go. So as you've heard me share, we say cut it off and let it go, but it's really cut it off and 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 cut it off. And somewhere down the road, some of these cravings, it can be multiple months or years, then the mind actually lets it go, right? So it's going to take some time. Mm-hmm. All right, Marcy, do you have a question?
Yes, Teacher David, real quick. So I had an experience this past Sunday. I was invited to my oldest daughter's house for a Labor Day get-together. And my daughter and I had been estranged for many, many years. So this was something that was coming around again. I went and we were playing Pictionary. And this being Marcy prior to, understanding and really practicing the Buddha's teachings was usually the loudest person in the room, probably very much intoxicated or under some other kind of substance, kind of almost out of a control being. But on this adventure that I was there, the being was very much reserved. A lot of action going on around, but I was very reserved, and it wasn't I was trying to do. It was just something I was doing, but it was brought to my attention that people had noticed that I seemed disattached, but I didn't feel disattached. Like I was enjoying myself, but I just wasn't standing on the coffee tables, taking shots and, going crazy. I was just really just more enjoying watching others interact around me and playing Pictionary. Is this something that people on the path to enlightenment will experience with other beings? Will other people see them as being detached or antisocial or less, less fun? I don't know. I didn't feel like I was having less fun. I was enjoying myself.
What you're experiencing is being around people who have expectations of you and wanting you to be a certain way. And when you're not meeting their expectations, they feel like something's wrong. So you got to get rid of any kind of expectations that you might put on yourself of wanting to meet other people's expectations, and realize that, hey, that's just their expectation, and you're just going to do whatever you're going to do, and you're going to enjoy yourself. If other people look at you and judge you as one way or another, so be it. That's going to help you to let go of any personal existence view and let go of any craving to please other people. So if other people say that, okay, whatever, it's up to them. You just enjoy yourself and do what you know to be wise and what you know to be best. And what you'll probably notice is you'll start spending time in different groups of people that are doing more and more wholesome things. And if people are doing unwholesome things around, you're going to be disinterested in that. And for them, they might feel like their happiness is based on having Marcy involved in what we're doing. And if Marcy's not involved in what we're doing, we're not happy. So they're just attached to you in that situation. And you'll just have to recognize it for what it is and just continue to do what it is that you know to be wise.
Thank you, Teacher David.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now we'll move on to the next one, which is chapter 14. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, it looks like Marcy and Helena both have hands up, so I'm going to go to Helena. I think Marcy, yours was just up from before.
5 factors of well-spoken speech. Monks, possessing 5 factors, speech is well-spoken, not badly spoken. It is blameless and beyond reproach, disapproval by the wise. What 5? It is spoken at the proper time. What is said is true. It is spoken gently. What is said is beneficial, and it is spoken with a mind of loving kindness. Possessing these 5 factors, speech is well spoken, not badly spoken. It is blameless and beyond reproach, disapproval by the wise.
Okay, so thank you, Helena. This is the 5 factors of well-spoken speech that I teach you guys in all the foundational programs about speaking at the proper time, what you say is true, spoken gently, beneficial, with a mind of loving kindness. I go through this in a lot of detail in all the foundational programs. Let me know what questions you guys have here so that I can help you if you have any questions. Remember, what you're going to need to do is memorize this. You're going to need to know this very clear. You should be able to close your eyes and know exactly what this is in order. You're going to need to know that it's the proper time, true, gentle, beneficial, with a mind of loving kindness, because you're going to need to be practicing this. And you're not going to be able to consult your book all the time to be able to handle any particular conversation. So one of the things that I used to do is I used to review this in the morning before I would go outside, because I knew I'd be involved in certain conversations. And then maybe at lunchtime or that evening, I would review it again and reflect back on the conversations that I had whether they went well or they didn't go well. And I would look to see what can I continue to do to ensure that I'm making wise decisions around my speech. Or if conversations didn't go well, I would identify the individual factors that I wasn't practicing, so the next day I could dial that in closer and closer. And one of the things that I might notice is just, let's say I wasn't speaking at the proper time. Maybe I was interrupting people. Maybe my mind wasn't prepared to speak. Maybe I was angry or frustrated or agitated. Or maybe the person I was speaking to, maybe their mind wasn't prepared to talk. Maybe they were angry or frustrated. So if I noticed that that was a problem, the next day I would be in situations where I'm talking, and I would just be sure that I'd focus on proper time, proper time, proper time, proper time. Or if I noticed that I wasn't speaking the truth, although that wasn't the case, I was speaking the truth pretty early on. But if I wasn't speaking gently, right, my tone, my tempo, my word choice, maybe that wasn't exactly at where it needed to be, and I need to dial that in. And if I noticed that that wasn't going well, I might spend the next week or 2 or 3 just focused on speaking gently, and that's it. Or beneficially. This is where you look at making sure you're clear and concise and precise. And after you get the proper time, the truth, the gentle, started narrowing that in, maybe you start practicing speaking beneficially and clear and concise. And then speaking with a mind of loving kindness. The opposite of this would be inner hate, where you're being hateful or vindictive. You would like to speak with this active goodwill, this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. So if you guys have questions on this, let me know. I just shared with you a little bit of a summary of what these are, but also giving you some guidance that you're going to need to memorize them, and you might need to refresh your memory 2 or 3 times a week. I would be refreshing my memory on this as I would go out into the world and practice it closer and closer. So it looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. She had a question. This was actually asked in one of your classes, and I'm just kind of reflecting on that. So one gentleman had asked, if you don't know the truth, should you go and or how do you know that what you're saying is true or not in some context, right? So one example could be that, well, this is what just my example is, could be other examples as well, is that you believe that, you have your parents that are actually your real parents, like they're born from them. But it could be the case that they are, they were actually adopted and never told you about it. But you're always saying that this is my mother and my father, believing that they are the real mother and father, the one who actually gave you birth. And in that case, are you actually speaking the truth because you're unaware of the truth at that point, and you're never told that you were actually adopted? And so, how far do you go to find the truth? I mean, are you going to look at your birth certificate and everything to understand whether you're actually born from some parents? And then there could be multiple examples like this where you're unaware of the truth, but you say something believing it's a truth.
Yeah, there's ways to do what the Buddha describes as preserving the truth. Preserving the truth means that you might preface or end something that you're saying with a certain preface. So you might say, based on my experience, da 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 da, or my opinion is da 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 da, or based on what I know about this situation, da 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 da, right? So that's not speaking in absolutes. Whereas if you speak in absolutes, then it's more likely that you could potentially be sharing something that's untrue. So you would like to preserve the truth. You're going to see this in a teaching from the Buddha where he talks about this, and you'll be able to learn how to do this and practice this more readily, because that way, when somebody comes and talks to you and says, hey, you didn't say the right thing here, if you're preserving the truth, then you're not speaking in absolutes. Because of the universal truth of impermanence, you know that there aren't really these absolutes in a lot of situations. So this is where you might say, well, typically the way that I approach that, something like that, or the way that I see that most often done, right? Or the way that I prefer to do that particular thing in most situations. This is a way to not speak in absolutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, looks like Marcy, you have a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Most recently, I have found that I have been restraining the mind when it comes to speech. The mind has had urges to, be the one to know, to give the wisdom, speech the wisdom. But I'm noticing that I'm pulling back, even when I feel there's that sense of like, oh, this truth, and I know this would be beneficial, and I'm going to say it because it's out of love and kindness, but this person doesn't seem like they're ready or open to hear it. So then I do like this internal restraint, and I don't know if this is good or bad, but it's almost like I have an internal conversation in my head, and I just keep saying, it's not the proper time. It's not the proper time. You need to let go of this craving. You need to let go of this craving. And then at the end of the conversation, I haven't heard what this other person really is saying anymore. If I kind of almost tuned them out.
Yeah, this is normal that you go through that period of time. This is where the mind's like thinking and pondering. And this is going to help you not only to learn to speak with right speech, but it's going to help eliminate conceit too, because in that situation that you're talking about, there's conceit there where the mind's wanting to step in and tell other people what they should or shouldn't do. So it's really good for your practice of right speech, but also for conceit. And you're going to see here in the next chapter where the Buddha talks about the way that he speaks when something is going to be disagreeable and unwelcome to others, that he knows the proper time to say this. So you're going to see it in the next chapter.
Thank you.
Okay, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. Looks like Mayuli's asking a question on Facebook. Let me see here. I do not get much sensual pleasures. I do enjoy being by the water. Lately, I have been enjoying paddleboarding on the water at the cottage. Although I was enjoying it, I was not attached to it. And when it was time to get out of the water, the mind was okay with it. Is this safe to say that this mind is not attached to the cord of sensual pleasure in terms of paddleboarding? Potentially, it sounds like it. If you're completely comfortable doing it and not doing it, and you're completely fine getting out, there's a good chance there that you're not attached to it. That's what you've got to observe with the mind. I wouldn't be able to just tell you just based on your comment here, but the more you develop your mindfulness, you'll be able to tell for yourself. But the things you're talking about here, Mayuli, this is what you would experience for someone who's not attached to it. Is you can enjoy it for the moment, you have a great time doing it, and then when it's over, and you're off to the next thing, and you're not longing, yearning for that thing anymore. And, if you have a attachment to something, it's going to be like, oh, I don't want to stop paddleboarding. No, I don't want to get out of the water. This is so fun. It's almost like a little kid throwing a temper tantrum. And, that's kind of overtly. But then you can also sense the mind doing this sometimes, that it's kind of tugging and pulling. So it sounds like you're not noticing any of that. So there's a good chance that you're not attached. But don't convince yourself of that. Just stay vigilant of the mind. Be observant of the mind. Don't let the guard down. The mindfulness is the guard, and you would always like to have that guard there to protect the mind, that if you're observing that the mind's longing, yearning, and pulling in any direction, whether you thought that the attachment to paddleboarding was gone or not, if you notice it, cut it off and let it go. Because if you convince yourself that you're not attached to paddleboarding, then you'll miss it when there's actually a longing, yearning, because sometimes these are very subtle. There's these residual cravings, these little residual clinging, especially when you get into that third stage of enlightenment. There's just these little underlying things that you almost won't even notice if you're not paying attention to it, because they're so subtle by this point, because you've let go of a lot of the really significant ones. But by that point, your mindfulness is so well tuned that you'll be able to notice those little minor ones. So don't ever convince yourself that you're unattached to anything. Just stay vigilant and diligent in every situation. And if any point you notice that you are attached to paddleboarding, then cut it off and train your mind to let go mentally. But of course, you can still do things while not being attached to it. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let's move to the next chapter. This is chapter 15, which is titled The Tathagata's Speech. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, looks like Vibhav got in there first. Then I saw, I think it was Helena or Marcy, and then Julie. Okay, so go ahead, Vibhav.
The Tathagata's speech. So too, Prince, such speech as the Tathagata knows to be untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial, and which is also unwelcome and disagreeable to others, such speech that the Tathagata does not speak. Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be true and correct but unbeneficial, and which is also unwelcome and disagreeable to others, such speech that the Tathagata does not speak. Such speech that the Tathagata knows to be true, correct, and beneficial, but which is unwelcome and disagreeable to others. The Tathagata knows the time to use such speech. Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial, but which is welcome and agreeable to others. Such speech that the Tathagata does not speak. Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be true, incorrect, but unbeneficial, and which is welcome and agreeable to others. Such speech that the Tathagata does not speak. Such speech as the Tathagata knows to be true, correct, and beneficial, and which is welcome and agreeable to others. The Tathagata knows the time to use such speech. Why is that? Because the Tathagata has compassion for all beings.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So the Tathagata is the Buddha. The word Tathagata means the one who discovers the truth, or one who shares the truth, one who discerns the truth. That's what the word Tathagata means. He very rarely used the Buddha to refer to himself as a Buddha. He tended to use this particular phrase or this pronoun of the Tathagata. This is also a way to refer to himself in the third person, to realize non-self. Of course, by the time he was teaching, he had already attained enlightenment, but oftentimes these things stick around, even though he could have said I, and sometimes he does, but oftentimes he's using the Tathagata. And he's saying that he has compassion here for all beings. What compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. When you're speaking to others and you know that they're not on the path, and even if you know people are on the path, it's wise to have compassion for them, that even though you're not causing other people to become discontent, their mind is causing it themselves. They don't necessarily realize that, right? Because they're not on the path. And while you could say and speak right speech and meet all 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and somebody could still get angry, somebody could still get upset, you would like to speak in such a way that it really minimizes the potential for them to get upset. And always realizing that if they do become angry or upset, their mind is causing it themselves. But again, they don't necessarily know that. But you would like to be able to speak more and more in a way that people aren't experiencing that when they're around you. So you can get to the point where 99.99999% of the time, people are just completely calm and peaceful around you, even unenlightened beings, because you're speaking in a way that doesn't trigger any of their particular cravings. And the Buddha is teaching you that with right speech in the Eightfold Path, with the 5 factors of well-spoken speech that we just talked about, but then also here as well. This is another layer of right speech. What he's talking about here is to know when to speak and when not to speak. So here, this first one, he's saying if something's untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial, but it's unwelcomed and disagreeable to others, then he doesn't speak that, right? And the reason why is because it doesn't meet the basic criteria of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, because it's untrue, it's incorrect, and it's unbeneficial. So even if it's unwelcomed and disagreeable, but also if it's welcomed and agreeable, he still doesn't speak that, because it's untrue, incorrect, and unbeneficial. Then he says, okay, if something's true and correct, but it's unbeneficial, once again, it's not meeting the basic criteria of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, and then it's unwelcomed and disagreeable, he says, I don't speak that either, right? And the same thing, even if it's welcomed and agreeable, because it's not meeting the basic criteria of being, even if it's meeting the basic criteria of true and correct, but it's not meeting the criteria of beneficial, but it's welcomed and agreeable, he still doesn't speak that, because it's not meeting that beneficial criteria of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. But here on the third one, he says it's true, correct, and beneficial. Okay, so what he has to say, it's meeting the basic criteria of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. But what he has to say is going to be unwelcomed and disagreeable to others. Okay, so in this situation, he has to know the proper time to say that, right? It's okay to say this particular thing, but you really got to know the proper time of the other person's mind. Is their mind in such a place that it's wise for you to share this particular thing at that time? And then the same thing is true here, where he says if something's true, correct, and beneficial, and it's welcomed and agreeable, you also need to know the proper time to say that too. Because let's just say you have something to say to somebody and you know that this is going to potentially arise some conceit in their mind. It might not be the proper time to say that, even though it's true, correct, and beneficial. But if it's welcomed and agreeable, maybe it's going to rise some conceit in their mind. Of course, they're the ones who are responsible for that, but you're not interested in being around a bunch of ego. So perhaps you decide to share that at another time when it's better to share it. So this is a deeper level of understanding speaking at the proper time, is even when it's meeting some of those basic criteria of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, you really got to pay attention to, is this thing going to be welcomed and agreeable to others, or is it going to be welcomed and disagreeable to others? It's almost like when you're learning how to speak in the way that the Buddha's teaching, you need to put your thoughts into like this quarantine area. It's like you have a thought that comes up in the mind and you kind of put it in this little box before you actually say it. And you actually look at it and you say, is it the proper time? Is it true? Is it gentle? Is it beneficial? Is it with a mind of loving kindness? Is it going to be welcomed and agreeable to them? Or is it going to be unwelcomed and disagreeable? And now when you look at all of that, now you make your decision of whether you're going to say that or not. And when you're first starting to work this way and you're starting to train the mind, you really got to slow it down and take your conversation somewhat slow. And initially, as you're doing this, it can be quite slow, but this is going to help you over time because you're going to be cultivating more and more wisdom, and you'll get better and better at understanding how to do this. But initially, you kind of have to put your thoughts into this quarantined area, and you're kind of looking at them and to decide whether it's meeting the criteria of what you would like to look at for the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. And then, is it going to be welcomed and agreeable or unwelcomed and disagreeable? So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter, the Tathagata's speech, chapter 15. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 16. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, go ahead, Marcy. I saw Julie earlier. Maybe you're not interested in reading again, Julia? Yeah, you will? Okay, I see your mouth moving. I'll just take you guys. I saw Julia before when Vibhav raised his hand. We'll come to you next, Marcy.
Okay, 4 qualities of a wholesome person. Monks, one who possesses 4 qualities can be understood to be a wholesome person. What for? Here, monks, a wholesome person does not disclose the faults of others, even when asked about them, how much less than when not asked. But when he is asked about them, then, led on by questions, he speaks about the faults of others with gaps and omissions, not fully or in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. Again, a wholesome person discloses the virtues of others, even when not asked about them, how much more than when asked. But when he is asked about them, then, led on by questions, he speaks about the virtues of others without gaps and omissions, fully and in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. Again, a wholesome person discloses his own faults, even when not asked about them, how much more than when asked. But when he is asked about them, then, led on by questions, he speaks about his own faults without gaps and omissions, fully and in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. Again, a wholesome person does not disclose his own virtues, even when asked about them, how much less than when not asked. But when he is asked about them, then, led on by questions, he speaks about his own virtues with gaps and omissions, not fully or in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. One who possesses these 4 qualities can be understood as a wholesome person.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So the Buddha here is once again going in and talking about speech and how to determine that you are a wholesome person and doing things that are wise. The first part is focused on like gossip and slander, and the next part is talking about your own conceit within your own mind. He's not actually calling that out, but you can understand the underlying thing that he's trying to teach you here. This first one, he's saying, okay, what a wholesome person's going to do is they're not going to disclose the faults of others, even when asked about them, how much less than when asked. But when he is asked about them, then led on by questions. Perhaps you have a boss, right? Or somebody who's asking you for feedback of a coworker. They might be asking you questions about this person and you need to speak about them. You're not interested in degrading them or disparaging them. You'd like to preface what it is that you're about to say in a professional way. You might say, well, Susie is really great at these things. Da, 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 da. She really applies herself here. She does this, she does that. I really admire these qualities about her, right? The things that if I was her that I would be interested in hearing and working on are these things, right? And you give some of those things in a very loving and kind way. And this is going to be favorable for you because if you're talking to your boss in this professional manner, rather than degrading or disparaging someone, it's going to be very helpful for you in your reputation and your ability to be successful personally and professionally. And then the Buddha here is talking about disclosing the virtues of others, that if someone is doing wholesome things, that you would be willing to share those in a way that is not having a filter, that you'd be more than willing to uplift people in the world, right? There's a lot of people out in the world that are knocking people down. You're not interested in being one of those people. You're not interested in going into a room, it's this dark room, and you see someone holding a candle and you put out their candle. Because now maybe your mind might think like, oh, my candle will shine brighter if I put out somebody else's candle. That's not the way it works. If we have two candles in the room, it's going to make the room brighter. So let's not put out other people's candle. Let's encourage them. Let's support them. Let's share things that are good and helpful and vibrant and uplifting. That's the way that you would like to conduct yourself. But you just got to be careful of that, because if you do a lot of that, someone's ego can come in, and you'd like to be aware of that. But the Buddha's talking here about a wholesome person is going to be willing to talk positively about others. Then when it comes to yourself, the Buddha is saying, okay, that you would be willing to disclose your faults, meaning that you're aware of the things that you need to work on. You're aware of the things you need to improve. Like sometimes when students are learning with me, when they first start out, they're telling me all these wonderful things about what's going on in their life, but that doesn't actually help them, because what you need to do is you need to be willing to share what are your challenges, what are your difficulties, because by sharing those things that you're struggling with, that's what's going to help you to be able to experience improvement, because you're gaining wisdom that you need in order to develop and grow and move forward and evolve as a better and better human being. So when it comes to your own faults, you would be willing to talk about those and explain those so that then you can get the help that you need. And then in terms of talking about your virtues, the Buddha is saying that a wholesome person wouldn't just go on and on and on and on and on and talking about themselves, because doing so would mean that there's conceit in the mind, and you're not interested in that. Now, if somebody asks you, like maybe you're at a job interview or something like this, you're going to need to talk about certain qualities that you have, certain credentials that you have. You're going to need to be able to talk about those in a way that's not boastful. So you're going to need to learn how to do that, because maybe the mind doesn't know how to do that right now, because maybe what you're used to is speaking through conceit. But you need to be able to find this middle way where you can speak intelligently about your skills and qualifications and your abilities without being boastful and arrogant and prideful. So let me know what questions you guys have here by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raising your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So Teacher David, the first part of this where he speaks about, gaps and omissions when you're asked about the faults of another person. This seems to be difficult for my mind. I find that when I am asked by my, the higher ups in my, I'm no longer there, but about other employees, I would just say, I don't feel, this is not something that I feel comfortable talking about, because it wasn't something I felt comfortable talking about. Is that like an avoidance? Am I having an avoidance to that? Or am I choosing wisely because the mind isn't trained enough to be able to speak about another person's faults with gaps and omissions? Because my mind goes right to what the truth is. What exactly is the truth? This is exactly what happened, A, B, C, D. This is how it is.
Yeah, anytime the mind is uncomfortable, there's some craving, desire, attachment that's producing that. So you're going to need to put the mind in situations that it is uncomfortable in, so that you can train it to cultivate the wisdom of how to accomplish that particular thing or do that particular thing while being comfortable. So pay attention to that. At that time, maybe you didn't have the wisdom that you needed in order to talk in a way that you did feel comfortable, but now you're learning more, you're practicing differently, and each day as you grow and you develop, you can put your mind in these kinds of situations. So if you're in a future situation, because I'm sure you will be, then you're going to need to arise some wisdom of how to do that. And now you might stumble your way through it. You might trip over your feet, but do the best that you can do. And then each time just get better and better with that. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, there won't be anything that you're uncomfortable about. You'd be able to do anything and everything. You're going to choose wisely to do certain things and not do other things. But if you found yourself in those situations, you could be perfectly comfortable.
Okay. And just a second part to the question here, Teacher David. The last part about, have gaps and omissions about my own virtues. I find that this mind, when, like at this last party, when it was kind of like cornered in a sense where people were, pointing out things that I, was not doing. I could feel, or I could see the body was getting a rise saying, but, this isn't my perception of things now. When I was really, I know now, very boastful about the virtues that I had acquired. Would it be more beneficial for the mind when in these situations to just be silent, just, thank the people for their opinions and just let it go and not try to have any kind of conversation? Would that be a part of like well-spoken speech, right? Proper time?
Yeah, what I would do in those situations is I would just either remain quiet or I would just leave, honestly. Because what this is people that are putting their expectations on you and wanting you to be a certain way. In no situation like what you just described would I say thank you to them. Because what they're doing is their ego is coming up and they're trying to give you this unsolicited guidance and they're putting their expectations on you. And if you say thank you in that situation, that's just going to continue. You either would need to decide to just remain quiet if you're going to stay there, or, just quietly get up and excuse yourself and go somewhere else or just leave entirely. Because that kind of situation is like people coming at you, putting their expectations on you, their conceit is arising, and you're not interested in being around those kinds of things because people are just judging you and looking at you in one way or another. I'm not sure whether it was family or friends, but I would really distance yourself from those kinds of things and those kinds of situations and those kinds of people that are doing that, because you're just going to invite those kinds of things by saying things like thank you and continuing to be around that stuff.
All right. Thank you, Teacher David. That was most helpful.
Yeah. I was in a situation just recently where I went with a couple of students into the main building of the temple. I teach in a classroom, but I went to the main building to see somebody else, and I sat down and we were kind of sitting around this person, and immediately their ego started coming up and they started telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing and what I should or shouldn't be saying. And I just looked to all the students and I said, okay, I'm going to leave now. And I just got up and walked out. And that's the best thing that you can do to continue to exist in that situation. Just doesn't produce any beneficial results at all.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yep. Okay. So let me see. It looks like Vibhav, you have a question?
Yes. So my question was around work situations where you have to kind of provide feedback for other people who you work with. And a lot of times, it's more feedback is about improvement, not necessarily, and in some cases it could be, feedback that could be, the company is asking for feedback for evaluation purposes, right? So, and the feedback is not always positive about persons, either like there's some room for improvement or the job, something is not being, could have been done better. And so how do you give feedback about a person without showing some fault? I'm not saying that they're a bad person or anything like that, but how do you give feedback in a way that actually shows that there's room for improvement and that they could have done something better without showing, those faults, I guess is the question.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, where what you would like to do is preface whatever you're going to say with like 3, 4, 5, 6 different wholesome qualities and things that this person's doing well. and then come in with, 2, 3, 4 things that they need to improve. And that's the way that you can share something with somebody in a way that they're comfortable to receive it. Oftentimes it's best to put these things in writing, because oftentimes when people are hearing these things, the contact is too much because they're seeing you and the facial expressions, they're hearing things, they're in that environment, that oftentimes these things written are much better. But you would like to preface whatever you're going to say that they can improve on with some things that they're doing very well, so that they can see that you're not just being demeaning and degrading and diminishing, but instead you see these wholesome qualities as well, and they'll tend to receive your feedback much more positively that way.
Okay, so in the first part says, when he speaks about the faults of others with gaps in the missions, not fully or in detail, is basically putting some high-level themes in there, saying this is how it could have been better, and not doing a lot into detail. That's what he means there.
Yeah, because like if you're working with an employee, let's just say they have 12 different things that they're doing that are problematic. You're not going to be able to address all 12 of those things and get them to change and improve all 12 things in one review cycle. Some companies do 6 months or a year review cycle. You're not going to be able to get them to work on all 12. So pick like 3 or 4 big ones that are really impacting them the most and put those in there, and then save the other ones for a future time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see. I don't see any questions anywhere else. So this next chapter is essentially exactly the same things that we just talked about, but it's the reverse. It's the 4 qualities of an unwholesome person. So the Buddha is taking those same things and then just flipping it around. So I don't know that we need to read this or talk about it. So I'm just going to move to the next one. Now we're at chapter 18. Okay, let me see. Here we go. Is there someone who would like to read this one? It's titled, Do Not Go by Oral Tradition. Okay, go ahead, Marcy.
Thank you, Teacher David. Do not go by oral tradition. Come, kalamas. Do not go only by oral tradition, by lineage of teaching, by hearsay, by a collection of scriptures, by logical reasoning, by presumed reasoning, by reason deep thinking, by the acceptance of a view after pondering it, by the seeming competence of a speaker, or because you think this person is our teacher. But when ka lamas, you know for yourselves, these things are unwholesome. These things are blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing. These things are denounced by the wise. These things, if accepted and undertaken, lead to harm and discontentedness, then you should abandon them. What do you think, Kalamas? Would, when craving, greed arises in a person, is it for his welfare or for his harm? For his harm, Venerable Sir. Kalamas, a craving, greedy person, overcome by craving greed, with mind obsessed by it, destroys life, takes what not given, transgresses with others' wives, and speaks falsehoods, and he encourages others to do likewise. Will that lead to his harm and discontentedness for a long time? Yes, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Kalamas, when anger, hatred arises in a person? Is it for his welfare or for his harm? For his harm, Venerable Sir. Kalamas, a person who is full of anger, hatred, overcome by anger, hatred, with mind obsessed by it, destroys life, takes what is not given, transgresses with others' wives, and speaks falsehoods, and he encourages others to do likewise. Will this lead to his harm and discontentedness for a long time? Yes, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Kalamas, when ignorance, delusion, unknowing of true reality arises in a person? Is it for his welfare or for his harm? For his harm, Venerable Sir. Kalamas, a person who is unwise, deluded, overcome by ignorance, delusion, unknowing of true reality, with the mind obsessed by it, destroys life, takes what is not given, transgresses with another's wife, and speaks falsehoods, and he encourages others to do likewise. Will that lead to his harm and discontentedness for a long time? Yes, venerable sir. Come, Kalamas. Do not go only by oral tradition, by lineage of teaching, by hearsay, by a collection of scriptures, by logical reasoning, by presumed reasoning, by reasoned deep thinking, by the acceptance of a view after pondering, by seeming competence of speaker, or because you think this person is our teacher. But when you know for yourselves these things are wholesome, these things are blameless, not responsible for wrongdoing, these things are praised by the wise, these things, if accepted and undertaken, lead to welfare and peacefulness, then you should live in accordance with them.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here, what essentially the Buddha is teaching you is what I teach you guys from the very beginning when you first start learning. Don't believe anything, right? Don't just listen to a teacher, including me and others. Don't just look at books and scriptures. Don't just go on lineage. If this person has some lineage and they're trace their lineage back to some particular teacher, just because someone speaks in a way that you think they're fairly competent. That's not what you're interested in doing. You're interested in getting to wisdom. That's what's going to lead to your enlightenment. So you need to know what's wise and unwise based on your own understanding through learning, reflecting to independently verify, and practicing. And then the Buddha goes through here with his student things like craving, anger, and ignorance to determine if this student understands what those are and whether or not they would lead to harm or other problematic situations in their life. And this particular student did understand that. So the Buddha was just confirming that this student understood what he had been learning, and that craving, anger, and ignorance isn't going to produce any beneficial results. So now that's what you look for. You look for within your own mind, you look for within your own life, whether or not you have any craving, anger, and ignorance, because that's what's going to lead to unwholesome results. And you need to get to the point where you're eradicating all of that and you're arising generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, because that's what's going to lead to the improvement to the condition of the mind. So don't just go based on someone's credentials or what clothes they're wearing or what people are saying about them. You need to be able to see and know for yourself. That's how you get to wisdom. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is chapter 19. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Keely, go ahead.
To understand even a single sentence, headman, because if they understand even a single sentence, that will lead to their welfare and peacefulness for a long time.
Yes.
That's all?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
It's just one sentence. So this is extracted from a certain teaching of the Buddha where he was explaining that if somebody learns his teaching and they understand even just a single sentence, that'll lead to their welfare and peacefulness for a long time. So let's just imagine, somebody walks into the temple, they overhear a conversation, and they hear that loving kindness eradicates anger, hatred, and ill will. And that's the only thing that they hear. And they walk away understanding that they need to be more loving and kind. If they just started doing that, that would be very good for their welfare and peacefulness for a long time. That's what the Buddha is saying. If you understand even a single sentence of his teachings, this is going to lead to your welfare and peacefulness for a long time. Well, if you guys are studying in this program and you've been studying regularly, then you probably understand more than a single sentence of the teachings of the Buddha. So that means your welfare and your peacefulness is just going to gradually increase. So the Buddha is explaining how impactful these teachings are if you're understanding how to approach them, you're understanding the natural laws of existence. Every time you're hearing the sentence of the teachings of the Buddha and you're starting to understand them and start to reflect on them and practice them, this is going to improve your welfare and peacefulness. As you're learning these teachings, things only get better. They don't get worse. You're not going to experience things getting worse in your life. You'll go through certain challenges and struggles and difficulties as you're implementing these teachings in your life. But as you do that, things are only going to get better. They're not going to get worse. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is probably one of the shortest ones in the entire book series. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to the last one, which is chapter 20. Someone who would like to read this? Okay, I see Julie's physical hand. Just so happen to see that. Oh, there's Keely again. Why don't we let Keely read since she got a short one last time? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, David. Develop meditation that is like the earth, water, fire, wind, and space. Rahula, develop meditation that is like the earth. For when you develop the meditation that is like the earth, horizon agreeable and disagreeable context will not invade the mind and remain. Just as people throw clean things and dirty things, excrement, urine, saliva, pus, and blood on the earth, and the earth is not horrified, humiliated, and disgusted because of that. So too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like the earth. For when you develop meditation that is like the earth, horizon agreeable and disagreeable context will not invade the mind and remain. Rahula, develop meditation. Rahula, develop meditation that is like water. For when you develop meditation that is like water, horizon agreeable and disagreeable context will not invade the mind and remain. Just as people wash clean things and dirty things, excrement, urine, saliva, pus, and blood in water, and the water is not horrified, humiliated, and disgusted because of that. So too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like water. For when you develop meditation that is like water, horizon agreeable and disagreeable context will not invade the mind and remain. Rahula, develop meditation that is like fire. For when you develop meditation that is like fire, horizon agreeable and disagreeable context will not invade the mind and remain. Just as people burn clean things and dirty things, excrement, urine, saliva, pus, and blood in fire, and the fire is not horrified, humiliated, and disgusted because of that. So too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like fire. For when you develop meditation that is like fire, a reason agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade the mind and remain. Rahula, develop meditation that is like wind. For when you develop meditation that is like wind, horizon agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade the mind and remain. Just as the wind blows on clean things and dirty things, on excrement, urine, saliva, pus, and blood, and the wind is not horrified, humiliated, and disgusted because of that. So too, the Rahula develop the meditation that is like wind. For when you develop meditation that is like wind, horizon agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade the mind and remain. Rahula, develop meditation that is like space. For when you develop meditation that is like space, horizon agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade the mind and remain. Just as space is not established anywhere, so too, Rahula, develop meditation that is like space. For when you develop meditation that is like space, horizon agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade the mind and remain. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So what the Buddha is talking about here is developing a strong, steady, solid, stable meditation practice. That no matter what's going on during your meditation, you're not affected by this. Like if you're meditating in your room and you hear a baby crying next door, be unaffected by it. It's just impermanent. Or you hear some lightning outside, you don't have to jump and be fearful. Just remain unaffected, right? So this is the way that you would like to develop your meditation practice, to the point where you would like to get so peaceful in your meditation that if you died in that moment, you'd be completely fine with that. You're not aspiring to die, you're not wanting to die, but just get so peaceful where you're not holding on to this world that if you literally died in that moment of meditation, you'd be completely fine. There's nothing that you're going back to the world for because you've let go of all these things in the world. The mind is mentally let go. You're still going to have possessions. You're going to still have things that you need in the world, but your mind is no longer grasping or clinging or holding on to anything. And here the Buddha is using earth, water, fire, wind, and space because these are often referred to as the four elements here. This is how they described things during the lifetime of the Buddha, mainly the body. This is how they would diagnose the body, and they would treat the body with certain herbs. And then what space is sometimes people call this a fifth element because the four here are referred to as the four elements. And then sometimes people call this space the fifth element, but it's really the absence of the others. So like in the body, you have the earth element, which is all the solids of the body. This is like your fingernails. This is like your hair, the bones, things like this, the solids, your teeth, things like this. That's the earth element. And then there's the water element. This is all this fluids of the body. This is like the blood, the urine, the pus, the mucus, the saliva, the tears, things like that. The fire, this is the digestion of the body. This is typically associated with digestion because it's the heat of the body. That's what the fire is. And digestion is in need of this heat. And oftentimes when there is digestion, it produces heat in the body. Wind is the movement in the body. So like the blood is the water element, but as it moves through the vein, that's the wind element that helps that to move through the vein. Or like the feces in your colon, the feces itself is the earth element, although it has some water and fire as well. It's using this wind element to move through the actual organ. So the body is described in these four elements, and every aspect of the world has some amount of earth, water, fire, and wind. So for example, this desk that I'm sitting at, it has a lot of earth, right? Because it's made out of wood. It's got a little bit of water too, right? There's a little bit of water element in there. There's a little bit of moisture. There's very little fire and there's very little wind, but there is some air in there as well. But in movement, right? What this space element is, the space element is the individual spaces. So like inside your nose, the nasal cavity, inside there's just space where there isn't any earth, there isn't any water, there isn't any fire, there isn't any wind, it's just space. And then the same thing inside the intestine. There's going to be certain space in there. The same thing in like the urethra. There's going to be some space in there. So this is how the body's described. And the Buddha is saying, hey, develop your meditation where it's nice and solid and steady and it's unaffected, just like the earth, water, fire, wind, and space. So let me know if you guys have any questions here on this particular chapter. Okay, it looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So Teacher David, during my meditation, I have moments where it's a sense of arisen, like joy, like there's a full, like a complete content feeling. Is that one of those things I need to cut off? Am I nurturing that? I'm having, difficulty discerning of whether or not this is something that needs to be cut off, or should I just be sitting with it?
If you're experiencing a feeling based on a condition, you would like to cut that off and let it go. If you're unsure that it is based on a condition, attempt to cut it off and let it go. And if it's conditioned, you'll be able to cut it off and let it go if your mind is fairly trained. But if it's an unconditioned thing like joy, like unconditioned joy or unconditioned happiness, and you tried to cut it off, you wouldn't actually be able to cut it off because it's unconditioned. There's no condition that's creating it. And yes, that's the kind of thing that you would like to nurture and continue to allow to permeate in the mind.
Okay. So if I have this content feeling and I try to cut it off, or I experience this contentness and I try to cut it off, but it remains, then it's something I should sit with.
It's not something you're interested in holding on to, but you can just notice that the mind is content, but don't cling
Okay.
to it, because right now you still have pollution in the mind. So if you cling to it, then when it's gone, then you'll be discontent that it's gone. So it's just kind of like, I see you over there, contentedness, sitting there minding your own business. Okay, I see you. Interesting. Okay, that mind is pretty content. Okay, that's nice. So you just kind of notice it, but you don't cling to it, because you know that at this point it's going to go away. And oftentimes the way that these conditioned mental qualities start to be experienced in the mind is it's not like a conditioned feeling. A conditioned feeling, it's going to arise, it's going to change, and it's going to fade away. There's going to be bodily sensations, then it's going to become a feeling, then it's going to affect the condition of the mind, then it's going to feed these mental objects, and it's going to ultimately fade away. These unconditioned mental qualities will start peering through as you're getting more and more of the pollution out of the mind. It's like the rays of the sun starting to peer through. They're either on or they're off. They don't arise, they don't change, and they don't fade away. It's either on or off. And that's how you'll know that it's an unconditioned mental quality versus a conditioned feeling that arises, changes, and fades away. So this is how you'll start experiencing those. It'll either be on or it'll be completely off. There's no arising, there's no changing, and there's no fading away of this particular, peace, joy, the contentedness, the calmness in the mind. It's either just on or off. And if you try to cut it off, you won't be able to cut it off. But you just notice that it's there, because those are the qualities of the mind starting to shine through from the enlightened mental state as you're getting more and more of this pollution out of the way. It's like the rays of the sun starting to shine through.
And so there would be no bodily sensations that would accompany it then, because it would just either be there or not be there.
Right. But early in practice, oftentimes somebody can be missing the bodily sensations because their mind hasn't been developed enough to have mindfulness. So they might be missing the bodily sensations and it becomes a feeling. So they're going to notice that that feeling arises, changes, and fades away. But if you've been practicing for a while and you have been able to see feelings arise, change, and fade away, but now you're starting to experience something different where it's just either on or off, that's the enlightened quality starting to shine through.
All right. Thank you, Teacher David.
This is what I refer to as the light bulb flickering. And you're going to experience this for a long time before the mind actually gets enlightened. You could experience this for 2 or 3 years before the mind is actually enlightened. Okay, so Vipab, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I just had actually a question on Ramala and his Buddha's son. So I just was wondering, do we have more information on what happened to him?
I know that he got to enlightenment, but that's all I know is that he got to enlightenment. I was surprised that we didn't see anything where he kind of like assumed the role of what the Buddha was doing. I haven't seen anything like that, but all I know is that he ultimately got to enlightenment, and that's all that I know about his life. But there's probably other things out there.
But there was some text, but I'm not sure what it is, that he maybe died young or something, but I'm not sure. That was another text I saw that died very young. Yeah,
it could have happened. The Buddha living until the age of 80. I know that there were multiple students of his that were dying long before him. Because, nowadays, if somebody lived to 80, we'd be like, wow, that person lived a good long life. If you can imagine 2,500 years ago, before medical technology, people's average lifespan was probably 30, 40 years old, I would imagine. That was probably what people lived to. So for the Buddha to live to age 80, that was pretty significant. So what we might consider to be a young death at age 30 or 40, that might have been like the average age of death during that time frame, where the Buddha just happened to live very long and he saw the death of multiple people, I'm sure, because he lived for so long. Okay, Keely, you have a question?
Yes, David. I want to ask, when we do the sitting or lying meditation, can we keep our eyes open just like walking meditation? Because the purpose of meditation is to train our mind to cut off things in our life. Are there any benefits to keep our eyes closed when we do the meditation?
Yeah, when you close your eyes, it helps you to go inward and look inward better. Whereas if you have your eyes open, it's one more sense base that you're taking in contact. And you'd like to kind of shut that down so you can look inward and really develop the mind. We have meditation like walking meditation where you keep your eyes open. There's the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings where you leave your eyes open. But in other situations, it's best if you close the eyes so that you can go inward and develop that introspection that you're going to need in order to develop your mind, because you're going to need that introspection at other times in your life as well, where, if something happens at work, you're going to need to be able to look inward and be able to uncover what's going on in the mind to be able to address any particular situation that you're having.
Okay. Thank you. Got it.
You're welcome. Mayuli has a question here on Facebook. She says, this is not related to this chapter. I hope it is okay to ask. I was invited to the neighbor's place for dinner at the cottage. I was offered wine alcohol. I told them I do not drink alcohol and said water would be fine. Later on that night, I was offered alcohol again, and this time they asked me to try a little bit. I understand they were trying to be a good host, and it was their craving. I didn't want to offend them and told them that I can't drink because I'm practicing the word of the Buddha and is part of the 5 precepts not to drink alcohol. Is this the way I should respond in the future? How can I respond to this type of situation? So this is Mara, right? This is Mara trying to tempt you into, hey, come and do this thing. And you've got to have that wisdom. And it sounds like you did. So that's great, Mayuli. If I were you, I wouldn't have gone into a lot of detail about what you said here, where you said, I told them that I don't drink alcohol and I said water will be fine. Because the way that people function is like when somebody's doing something wholesome and they realize they're doing something unwholesome, by allowing you to continue to do things that are wholesome, they feel like less of a person within their own mind. And it kind of brings to their attention that they're doing something unwise. So they're going to try to lure you into doing what it is that they're doing, because then they can feel better about what it is that they're doing. So if you're being offered alcohol like this at a night over at a neighbor's house, what I would have said is I would have just said, oh, I'll take some water. I wouldn't even gone into, I don't drink alcohol, because that brings to their mind that, hey, we're doing something that's unwise. In order for us to feel comfortable, we've got to convince her to drink some alcohol. And that's the only way that we can feel comfortable, because they have a craving and a desire for everybody to do the same things as they are, because otherwise it brings to their attention they're doing something unwise. So if you leave that first part out and just say water will be fine, or, oh, thank you for your offer, I'll drink some water, or something like that. And then, of course, if they say, well, why don't you drink? You could just say, oh, I prefer not to drink. I prefer to drink water today. Right? You could say it that way. And then if they keep persisting, you could let them know that you practice the teachings of the Buddha, but that's up to you in each situation, how much you would like to expose. But initially, don't need to tell them that you don't drink. Just let them know that what it is that you would prefer, and stay focused on the positive, that this is what I would prefer, which is the water. That's the way I would have handled it if I was you. Okay. I don't see any other questions anywhere. Okay, so what I'll do is just thank all of you guys for joining. Thank you guys for reading. Thank you guys for your questions. If you're studying outside of class, thank you for that as well, because the more that you're studying and learning and growing, when you come to class, you'll be able to ask questions and participate in ways that is going to help us to get deeper and deeper into these teachings. Again, I apologize for switching up the chapters from last week to this week, but now we're going to be back onto our normal schedule, where next week, we're going to be in chapters 31 through 40. So if you'd like to read ahead of time, or you read after class, you'll be able to do that. We're going to just pick it up and go forward from there. Tomorrow in our group learning program, we're going to be in Volume 1, Chapter 21. This is where we're talking about the future of our planet and how to do no harm to our planet. So if you'd like to join that, you're welcome to do that. On Wednesday, I'm going to be doing meditation with students and opening up to any and all questions that you guys have. And then the following Saturday and Sunday, you guys know that we do the group learning program in the Pali Canon English study group. I'm going to be traveling here starting on Wednesday. I'm going to be making my way to Mexico. And then for 3 weeks, I'll be in Mexico. So as long as I have internet connection, as long as I'm sitting in front of a computer, I'm going to be teaching all the same normal classes that I always teach. Plus, I'm going to be teaching the classes at the places in Mexico. I've got 2 courses that I'm going to be teaching in 2 different cities, and those aren't going to be live streamed. Initially, they were planning to do that, but they weren't able to bring together the equipment that was needed to do that. But I'll still be doing the morning and evening classes that I normally do because the time zone is perfect for me to be able to continue to teach classes. So I'll be able to see you on Saturdays and Sundays and Wednesdays, just like I always do. So thank you all for understanding if I experience some impermanence along the way. Maybe a flight gets canceled. Maybe I get stuck in an airport somewhere and I can't teach. You never know. When I went to Egypt a couple of years ago, there was a couple of times where there just wasn't enough bandwidth for me to get online and teach. So if you guys are online and it's like, 5 minutes past the time where I would normally be teaching and I haven't shown up yet, you'll know that there's been some impermanence somewhere. So thank you all again for joining, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and have a lovely rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.